Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the oral presentation session for our symposium, The Interface Between Experience and Linguistic Structure and Psycholinguistic Research. My name is Emily Silvano, and it's my pleasure to serve as a coordinator and chair of this symposium, together with my colleague, Dr. Márcio Leitão. Today, we will have the opportunity to hear a series of exciting presentations that reflects the diversity and quality of the current research in psycholinguistics. The study presented during our symposium addressed important theoretical and applied questions and showcase innovative approaches from researchers working across different areas of our field. So before we begin, I would like to thank all presenters for their contributions and all attendees for joining us. I encourage you everyone to engage actively with the presentation and the discussion periods that follow. Without further ado, let us begin our session. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Vera Simonova, who will present From Physical Discovery to Mental Self-Awareness.
Good afternoon. My name is Vera Simonova, and first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to present my work at this Congress. I'm grateful to Professor Juliana Nava-Gomes for chairing the 13th International Society of Applied Psycholinguistics Congress, to the organizing and scientific committee of the Congress for making this academic exchange possible, to Emily, Silvano, and Márcio Leitão organizing this symposium, for bringing together research connected with language, cognition, and psycholinguistic processes, and to all participants watching this presentation, of course. The title of my paper is From Physical Discovery. The starting point is the ordinary, prototypical use of the English verb find. In its central sense, find describes a resultative event of discovery. An agent locates an object and the event culminates in a result. Something previously hidden, lost, absent, or unknown becomes available to the agent. In controlled discovery, this event also presupposes search. The agent has a goal, directs attention towards a target, and the result is the match between intention and outcome. However, find also has uses that move away from the simple physical scenario. It can refer to discovering a fact, realizing a condition, encountering something unexpectedly, or forming an evaluation. The paper treats these uses not as unrelated homonyms, but as members of polysemous network. They are connected by a discovery schema, but different components of that schema become foregrounded or backgrounded in different contexts. This becomes especially important in the construction find oneself. In expressions such as find oneself in a hospital bed, find oneself running down the street, or find oneself unable to act, the agent no longer finds a separate external object. Instead, the subject or agent becomes aware of the self in a place, state, activity, or situation that was not fully intended or controlled. The discovery schema remains present, but it is reorganized. The found entity is the subject's own experiential position. The central question of the paper is therefore the following. How can a verb of discovery come to license the construction of self-awareness? More specifically, what semantic shifts allow English find to move from physical discovery to reflective self-awareness? And why should English find oneself not be treated as fully equivalent to Russian найти себя? The aim is not to claim that the English construction always has one fixed interpretation. On the contrary, its interest lies in the fact that it is semantically flexible. Sometimes the emphasis falls on physical location, sometimes on a psychological state, sometimes on an activity, and sometimes on a broader existential interpretation. What unites these uses is the pattern of becoming aware of the self as already positioned within a circumstance. The analysis combines lexicographic and corpus evidence. The lexicographic component comes from dictionary definitions of find and find oneself. These definitions make it possible to identify the basic semantic components associated with the verb: source, encounter, localization, result, recognition, evaluation, and awareness. They also show that find oneself is not limited to one narrow meaning. It may involve location, situation, activity, state, and in some cases, even identity. The corpus component is based on examples from the corpus of contemporary American English and the Russian national corpus. The corpus examples are used not simply as illustrations, but as contextual evidence for the constructional behavior of find oneself and for the contrast with Russian expressions as well. The analysis observes what types of complements follow find oneself, also what kinds of evidence are profiled, and which semantic features become salient in actual usage. Methodologically, the paper compares controlled and uncontrolled discovery. Controlled discovery highlights intentional search and successful localization. Uncontrolled discovery reduces the role of search and foregrounds encounter, surprise, or reduce control. This shift is crucial because it prepares the way for find oneself. Once the search component is weakened, find can profile the moment of becoming aware of a situation rather than the deliberate act of looking for something. The paper also tracks changes in agency, transitivity, and referential structure. In prototypical find, the subject and object are distinct. In find oneself, the subject and object become co-referential. But this doesn't mean that the discovery schema disappears. Rather, the schema is internalized. The event is no longer a subject finding an external target, it becomes a subject becoming aware of the self as positioned inside an event. The argument can be described as a gradient path. The first point of the path is prototypical control discovery. Someone searches for an object and finds it. This stage is characterized by directionality, transitivity, and result. The subject acts upon the world, the object is external, and the event reaches a clear endpoint. The second point is uncontrolled discovery or accidental encounter. Here, the subject may discover something while doing something else. The search phase is defocused here. The encounter component becomes more prominent. This type of use is still resultative, but the result is less strongly connected to intention. Surprise and reduced control become more important. For example, a person may find a note in a pocket, find a door open, or come home to find that something has happened. In such context, find doesn't necessarily mean search successfully. It means come to know or encounter as a result of experience. The third point is the reflexive construction find oneself. Here, the object position is occupied by a reflexive pronoun. So the subject and object become co-referential. The subject finds himself or herself, but the construction normally requires a further element. Find oneself in a place, find oneself in a situation, find oneself doing something, or find oneself unable to act, and so on. This so called further element is important because it shows that the construction is not simply about discovering the self as an abstract object. It is about discovering the self as located, affected, engaged, or constrained in a particular experiential configuration. So, the fourth point is emergent self awareness. In Find Oneself, the speaker often presents a state of affairs as something that becomes conscious only after the subject is already inside it. The subject is both participant and observer. This double status is what makes the construction particularly interesting from a psycholinguistic and cognitive semantic perspective. It retains eventive placement because someone is in a place, state, or action, but it also profiles reflective awareness because the subject becomes aware of being there. The main claim, then, is that find oneself occupies an intermediate zone between transitive discovery and mental state predicates. It is not a simple mental verb such as realize or understand. At the same time, it is not ordinary transitive discovery. It preserves the resultative structure of find while shifting the target of discovery from an external object to the subject's own experiential position. This intermediate status also explains why find oneself often sounds more dynamic than a purely cognitive predicate. For instance, if we say, I realized that I was unable to act, the focus is on knowledge here. If we say, I found myself unable to act, the focus includes the experience of being caught in that state. The construction, therefore, combines awareness with the experiential texture of an event. The contrast with Russian is central to the paper because it shows that self awareness is not packaged in the same way across languages. English find oneself often foregrounds self location and emergent awareness. The subject finds himself in a situation, which usually implies that the situation was not fully planned, intended, or controlled. The construction is therefore well suited to contexts of sudden realization, unexpected involvement, or reflective recognition after the fact. Russian найти себя has a different default profile. It more readily evokes the idea of achieved identity, successful self definition, or personal orientation. When Russian speakers say найти себя, the expression often suggests that the person has found a vocation or a stable sense of self or a meaningful life direction. This is related to self awareness, but it is not the same construal as English find oneself in a hospital bed or found oneself unable to act. This means that English find oneself and Russian найти себя should be not treated as automatic equivalents. In some identity related contexts, найти себя may be appropriate, but in many other contexts, Russian requires a different solution. Оказаться, обнаружить себя, осознать, or a paraphrase depending on whether the English sentence profiles location, state, activity, constraint, or awareness. The translation implication is therefore conceptual rather than merely lexical. The translator must decide which component of the English construction is more relevant in context. Is the sentence mainly about location? Then Russian equivalents such as оказаться may work. Is it about reflexive awareness? Then осознать or понять may be necessary. Is it about stable identity? Then найти себя may be possible. The English construction integrates these components more compactly than Russian does. The paper makes two main contributions to psycholinguistic discussion. First, it proposes a cognitive taxonomy of find centered on shifts in agency, control, and referential structure. This taxonomy shows that the abstract uses of find are not arbitrary extensions. They are motivated by a gradual reweighting of the components of the discovery schema. Search may become less prominent, encounter may become more prominent, and the result may become cognitive rather than purely physical. Second, the paper shows that find oneself occupies an intermediate zone between transitive discovery and mental state predicates. This is important because it helps explain why the construction feels both eventive and reflective. A person finds himself in a situation not because he deliberately searched for himself, but because he becomes aware of himself as already involved in that situation. The construction, therefore, provides a linguistic window into the relation between experience and self awareness. From a psycholinguistic perspective, the contrast between English and Russian is also revealing. It shows that languages may differ in how they map experience onto grammatical and lexical structure. English find oneself can condense placement, reduced control, and self observation into a single construction. Russian tends to distribute these components across different lexical choices, depending on whether the focus is situational, cognitive, or identity based. More broadly, the study argues that introspective meanings can be motivated by systematic semantic reorganization. Physical discovery provides the conceptual basis. Reduced control and unexpected encounter create the bridge. Reflexivization internalizes the schema, and the result is a construction that profiles self awareness. This makes the construction relevant not only to lexical semantics, but also to psycholinguistic questions about how speakers move from embodied experience to abstract reflection. The semantic history of fine suggests that the language of introspection is often grounded in more concrete event schemas. To conclude, the semantic development of English fine can be modeled as a movement from physical discovery to mental self awareness. In prototypical uses, fine involves a seeker, an external target, and a result. In less controlled uses, the research component is weakened and the encounter component becomes more prominent. In Find Oneself, the discovery schema is internalized. The subject discovers not an object, but the self as situated in an experience. This path can be summarized as a chain of semantic reweighting. The original result component is preserved, but the locus of the result changes. The external object gives way to a fact, then to a situation, and finally to the subject's own experiential state. This is the main reason why the construction belongs both to the domain of event structure and to the domain of self awareness. This is why English find oneself shouldn't be equated with Russian найти себя in a general way. The English construction foregrounds self location and emergent awareness, while the Russian expression more canonically profiles achieved identity and self definition. This difference is not simply a matter of translation, it reflects different ways of organizing self awareness linguistically. If I were to formulate the practical outcome in one sentence, I would say this. When translating find oneself, we shouldn't ask first to which word corresponds to find, which part of the self awareness event is being profiled. The answer may be location, state, action, realization, or identity. Only after that decision can an appropriate Russian equivalent be selected. That's all. Thank you very much for your attention.